It's my pleasure to welcome Rick Ledgett, former NSA Deputy Director, to the Cipher Brief studio once again. Rick, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Suzanne.
The news that a Cipher Brief broke last week that General Timothy Haugh, the director of the NSA, and his deputy at the NSA as well, Wendy Noble, had been fired from their positions. I think it's safe to say it came as a shock to the national security ecosystem, really, especially to the community around the National Security Agency. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit, Rick, and get your thoughts on why you think something like this sends such shockwaves through this very tight-knit community at the NSA.
Sure. I think it helps to start with what the mission of NSA is. NSA has two missions. One is signals intelligence, which is collecting communications overseas in order to reveal what our adversaries are doing. And the other mission that NSA has is cybersecurity, which is securing U.S. and allied networks from foreign attempts to penetrate them and steal information from us. And those are both very, very technical fields. And that was actually came out during the Snowden leaks when a lot of stuff was in the media that the media got wrong because they didn't understand the technical foundations upon which it was built. And so in order to run missions like that, you need people who are extremely competent and very versed in the ins and outs of how to do that. Tim Haugh, the four-star former commander of Cyber Command and director of NSA, was a career intelligence officer, spent 35 years building up expertise in this area. Wendy Noble, the civilian deputy director, was a 30-plus year veteran and had done literally every job there is to do at NSA. And so the loss of that expertise is stunning. So that's part one. I think part two is the way that it was done. It was just out of the blue. And if you believe, what you read in the press, it was because of the advice of some influencer, some extremist influencer, Laura Looney or something like that, who recommended to the president that he fired the two of them, in addition to some National Security Council people. And so, to me, that's just completely shocking and unprecedented.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsedge.com.
This administration has made clear that loyalty to the president is important. We saw during his first term that he believed there was a deep state that was out to get him. Timothy Haugh and Wendy Noble aren't two people who have seemed political in any aspect of carrying out their job in these roles. So I wonder, what your thoughts are on sort of how this is impacting the NSA workforce, because these really are meant to be civil service jobs that, transition from one administration to another, focused on, as you mentioned, that expertise that's so important to the mission.
That's right. Wendy and Tim are both as apolitical as they come. Neither one of them has made any decisions or taken any actions in their job that was political or could even have been perceived as political. And it seems to me that they may not have been as sycophantic as some of the people. You recall the cabinet meeting that the president had early on, where cabinet member after cabinet member, thanked him for doing such a great job and being such a wonderful leader. And that's fine if the people feel that way, but seeing cabinet member after cabinet member do it just seems to me inappropriate. And I think Wendy and Tim don't roll that way. So
let's focus again, if we can, for just a couple of minutes on the mission. I'm not sure that the mission of the NSA, as you mentioned right off the top, Rick, is really well understood by the broader U.S. public, and in a way that was kind of by design originally. I mean, the NSA, people used to joke and say it stood for no such agency, but really the focus is on signals intelligence. And this is a time when, as you know, being the former deputy director of this agency, you understand the adversary threat against the United States, and then how this particular agency is really well positioned to sort of detect and then, whenever possible, disrupt those threats. What is your main concern now with the change of leadership at the top, with sort of not really, there's a lot of confusion about what it's going to take to get people that the administration approves of in these roles now, because it's clearly not just expertise. What is your concern about the actual mission and how it might be impacted?
So I think that first off, Joe Hartman, the former deputy commander of Cyber Command, now acting commander of Cyber Command and acting DERNSA or director NSA, is a fine guy, and he's a good leader, and he is competent. He was the deputy of Cyber Command, and so he didn't have the same reach and the same scope of duties that Tim had. And Sheila Thomas, the executive director, who's now the acting deputy director of NSA, is also a wonderful person. And so, but I worry that Wendy and Tim were so involved in so many high-level programs and high-level discussions that it's really tough to step into those jobs, especially with no time to fleet up. It's not plug and play. You have to ramp up into the job. And so I worry, especially at a time when the Chinese are having their way with our networks, the Salt Typhoon and Bolt Typhoon sets of intrusions, that there's a huge opportunity for a misstep or a missed step, where they, through no fault of their own, but they miss something that they should have, something that would have been automatic for Tim and Wendy to do. They'll not.
Yeah, there's always, I think, opportunities anytime you're transitioning anything. I mean, it could be the, director of a local office in your own community. There's always that sort of learning the ropes kind of thing when it comes to the details, because they obviously understand the fundamentals of the job as well. China, General Haugh spoke at the Cipher Brief Threat Conference in October last year. He gave one of the keynote addresses there and really focused on China. I mean, it was almost as if he could not say enough about the threat that China poses to U.S. national security. We hear all the time about the threat that China and Chinese espionage in particular have created around U.S. private sector companies. The government is doing their part to try to educate those companies. But from the NSA perspective, how would you describe the China threat to the United States today? And why is this so important?
So China is, I believe, the number one threat that the United States faces, and that's for a variety of reasons. One of them is the scope of what they do. They have more people doing cyber than the entire Five Eyes community put together. And so there's just a lot of them. And the other thing is that they are very, very good at what they do. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that Russia was better than China. Now I think China is a peer competitor to Russia in this space and to the United States. And so we suffer from the problem that we are more reliant on computer networks than virtually anybody else in the world. And we have been for longer. And what that means is we have this installed base of equipment, trillions of dollars worth of equipment in, say, the telecommunications companies that's installed. And so as the Chinese penetrate that, it's really expensive and really difficult to get them out, because you're talking about replacing massive amounts of equipment. In the case of China or Russia or other countries that are newer to the computer age, they don't have that installed base at the same level. So it puts us at a serious disadvantage.
You mentioned Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon. It's been, I think we might be approaching a year now since the discovery of China hackers in these systems across a number of U.S. private sector companies was detected. still don't have kind of a clear plan on how to get them out. To your point, this is a lot harder than people think it is. Why is it so hard?
It is. It's not like just changing a few passwords here and there. They have persistent access. They're into the infrastructure of the telecommunications companies. And one of the things that you do when you gain access to a target network, and I know this from my previous life, is the first thing you do is you establish other means of access. You don't just have your one way in. You reach out to the sides, you move laterally, you elevate privileges, and you look for other ways out so that you can survive upgrades to equipment or password changes, things like that. That's really why it's so difficult. And that and the fact that these networks are hugely complicated, they're full of legacy equipment, and they've got lots of connections to each other. So for example, when, pick on AT&T and Verizon, when they exchange data to make the global telecommunications network work, they have to have trust relationships across that. You can't have data flowing in a way that's slow. It has to be quick. In order to do that, you need trust relationships. So those trust relationships are part of the exploit chain.
Yeah. We talked about China. Let's talk about the other one you mentioned, which was Russia, also very good at what they do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of operations within NSA that are more on the offensive side. And we had heard some rumors when President Trump first began his second term earlier this year that offensive cyber was going to be a priority. And then there was some mixed reporting in the news about, wait a minute, maybe not as aggressively going against Russia. I'm wondering, as you're reading all these same headlines we are, Rick, how are you making sense of the Russia threat? And if you could describe sort of how you see the Russia threat today against the United States, that would also be great.
Sure. So Russia is definitely a threat to the United States. And while the political rapprochement that's going on between the U.S. and Russia is, it's fine, it's the president's policy, so we'll execute that policy. You can't take your eye off the ball. We need to continue to work Russia. One slight correction to what you were saying, NSA doesn't do offensive cyber operations. That would be the Cyber Command side. And it's not unusual when there are political activities going on. Say, for instance, someone high level is visiting another country, then we will pause offensive operations around that country. We'll slow down cyber activities, we'll slow down air reconnaissance activities, things like that, to avoid giving them something that they can point to and say, you're not trustworthy, or something that could even cause an international incident. And so I'm okay with that. What worries me is the intelligence. That should be going on 24/7, regardless of where we are in the political domain. And so, and I don't have any information on whether the intelligence has slowed down or not, but it would be something that would concern me.
Yeah, that was great. I'm really glad you corrected me on that, Rick, because for most people who follow the Cipher Brief and read it regularly know all of this, but the NSA actually focuses on intelligence gathering around the world using primarily signals intelligence. And Cyber Command is the military component, of course, that does conduct operations that might be offensive in nature against U.S. adversaries who are trying to do the same to us. So thank you for that. Moving forward, I just have to ask, what will be the important factors that you'll be looking for in whoever becomes the next permanent NSA director, which, by the way, we haven't even talked about yet, but we should before I let you go. This division between NSA and Cyber Command, it's been rumored that it's going to be happening for, it seems like, a decade now. I know that Trump talked about it during his first administration. President Biden talked about it during his administration. I don't believe that there was a big push within those in the expert realm to get this done quickly. What would be some of the risks that the U.S. would be facing if there were a split, and if that split were to come too fast?
So I think that first off, the only place the organizations are connected is in the position of the director. Below the director, there are completely separate chains of command and completely separate activities. But what that lets the director/commander do is own the trade space between the two, because in any situation there are pros and cons to exploiting and then using something for offense. Because if you think about it, if from the NSA side, our job is to get into the network and steal information from it and not have the people know what we're doing. On the Cyber Command side, the goal is to get in there and break things. And so you want them to know what you're doing. And sometimes you want them to know that it's the United States that did it. And so those are fundamentally different viewpoints. And what the dual hat does is allows the director to own that trade space. So there's been talk over, as you said, over a decade on splitting the two, because I will tell you that it is a huge job. And the commander of Cyber Command has a military deputy, and the director of NSA, who's the same person, has a civilian deputy, and both deputies are heavily involved in running the organization. So that's the only way it's possible. But so wherever you are on the split, if the split is not done carefully, you run the risk of the organizations being out of balance. And if, say, you had a 4-star commander of Cyber Command and you put a 3-star director of NSA, that automatically puts you in a bad position for making that trade space. And the other issue, and this one is a little more topical right now, is the idea of the president being able to appoint 2 people to those positions and getting the kind of people that he perhaps wanted there, where loyalty is more important than expertise. I believe that's very, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. I think we've done a good job during this few minutes that we've had together talking about why you believe that too. Any final kind of closing thoughts for us, Rick, as you're looking forward, like we are, to seeing who will become the permanent heads of those of the NSA and of Cyber Command?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. If I were still at NSA in a leadership position, I would be mentally formulating my red lines. In other words, here's the things that I will do, and here's the point beyond which I won't go. Here's the point at which I would have to raise my hand and say, sorry, sir, you're going to have to find someone else to do this job because I can't do it, and I would have to resign. And I believe that that's something that whether to stay or go is a very individual decision, and I'm not trying to advise people one way or the other. I think the nation needs good people at NSA and Cyber Command. But you also have to have that self-respect, that respect for the law, that respect for what's right. And so I believe the time to think about that is before you get in the position where you have to do it. Because if you don't, then you end up being like the proverbial frog in the pot, where the heat just keeps getting turned up gradually, and next thing you know, you're cooked. So my advice to people would be, have that mental discussion with yourself and decide what your red lines are, and then stick to them.
Yeah, I think particularly you've done a great job explaining why expertise is so important in this particular function, in this particular part of the U.S. national security community. And we would hope that this message is getting back to the White House as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Rick Ledgett, former Deputy Director of the NSA and a Cipher Brief expert, for sort of like connecting the dots a little bit for us and explaining to this on one deeper level what all this means. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Suzanne.